Welcome to the New Gravity Housing Conference session, Affordable Aspirations, Piloting a Living Future in the Midwest. I'd like to remind our attendees that everyone is muted with video off. Please utilize the Q&A feature in Zoom throughout this session to share your questions with our presenters. We'll be monitoring this throughout the session and we'll also have a facilitated Q&A at the end. Please use the chat feature in Zoom for a side and general discussion. We'd like to thank our sponsors for their generous support of this year's conference. Make sure to check them out in the virtual expo hall. Here's a brief message from one of our sponsors, ComEd Energy Efficiency Program, before we get started with this session.
The ComEd Energy Efficiency Program has been helping owners save energy and reduce their operating expenses in new buildings and buildings undergoing major renovation since the start of the new construction offering in 2009. The program's impact has been tremendous. What you are seeing is a graphic representation of projected annual savings in kilowatt hours for new construction projects that have received both technical assistance and financial incentives from the ComEd New Construction Service from 2009 to 2016. The colorful bars illustrate a variety of building types that have benefited from the program, including manufacturing, higher education, retail, healthcare, and more. The program supports the transformational work of developers, building owners, and design teams.
The ComEd Energy Efficiency Program's Affordable Housing New Construction offering provides technical and financial assistance for projects to achieve beyond code energy performance while supporting occupant health and comfort. Eligible projects can be new construction or major renovation. They must be located in ComEd's service area. They must serve income-eligible residents earning 80% or less of area median income, and they must be designed and constructed in accordance with the ComEd multifamily standard. Contact us to learn more and get started today. businessee@comed.com.
Thank you again to ComEd Energy Efficiency Program and to all of our New Gravity sponsors. Now let's get into the session. Our speakers today are Jessica Berzac, President and co-owner of UPholdings, Susan King, Principal at HED, Sierra Latham, Director, Moving Forward Program, Energy Systems Network, and Susan Puri, Affordable Housing Manager at the International Living Future Institute. Here are the learning objectives for this session. As a reminder, the New Gravity Housing Conference is approved for FIAS, PHI, AIA, and GBCI credit. Thank you for joining us, and don't forget to use the Q&A feature throughout the session to ask presenters questions. Now I'll turn it over to our speakers to get started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Affordable Aspirations, Piloting a Living Future for the Midwest. I'm Susan Puri with the International Living Future Institute. I manage our affordable housing initiative. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about that program, and then a little later you're going to hear from some of our project teams in Indiana and Illinois. ILFI is a 501c3 nonprofit that's headquartered in Seattle, Washington. Our mission is to catalyze the transformation towards communities that are socially just, culturally rich, and ecologically restorative. We're the home of the Living Building Challenge, which is our oldest and most well-known certification. We now have a few other building certifications. Zero carbon and zero energy are certifications that are both solely focused on energy use and renewable energy. Our newest certification, CORE, pulls out the 10 best practices from the Living Building Challenge. So CORE and the Living Building Challenge are both holistic grading systems focused on high aspirations of sustainability. There's 7 petals within the Living Building Challenge: place, water, energy, health and happiness, materials, equity, and beauty. Energy and a few of the other petals are familiar to a lot of green rating systems and programs. Equity and beauty are a little bit more unique to the Living Building Challenge. There are 20 imperatives within the Living Building Challenge. You can see them all listed here. The ones that are marked with the green spiral are also required for core certification. ILFI's philosophy for the built environment is that all buildings should function in the same way nature and natural systems do. So we use the metaphor of a flower to illustrate this point. Flowers receive everything that they need from their own environment, from the sun and the rainfall. They don't need any external infrastructure. So living buildings function much the same way. Living buildings, just like flowers, are also beautiful. And we feel that's important for sustainability because people take care of things that are beautiful and they tend to last longer. The goal of the Living Building Challenge is to move away from just mitigating negative environmental impacts and negative impacts on occupants and move all the way to positive impacts. So the goal isn't to build with a little less toxic materials or cause a little bit less climate change, but actually move all the way into positive and regenerative impacts. So another way to say this is, instead of trying to build a world that's a little bit less bad than what we already have, we ask the question, what would good actually look like? The Living Building Challenge is a philosophy as well as an advocacy tool and a certification program. It's holistic in that it includes categories like equity, beauty, and health that affect the occupants as well as the overall community, in addition to just environmental impacts. It's based on the actual building performance, so it's not based on an energy model or even what's written into a project specification, but how the building actually performs and what actually gets built. It's an advocacy tool in that some of the imperatives within the Living Building Challenge are not usual in some jurisdictions, in some cases not necessarily even legal. So project teams that face those kind of barriers, it doesn't mean that they're kicked out of the Living Building Challenge or can't certify. In those cases, they use their building as an advocacy tool to fight against these barriers, you know, and eventually remove them over time. Living Building Challenge and all our programs also evolve through application. So as we get more feedback from our project teams. The Affordable Housing Initiative grows out of ILFI's focus on equity. We know that there are a lot of inequities in the built environment. Affordable housing residents pay a lot more in utility bills than other residents. We have projects just within our own group where residents in the past pay up to $600 in utility bills in communities where, you know, half the community is living below the federal poverty line. So you can see there's a significant burden there. We also have projects in our affordable housing group that are being built for residents that have been exposed to lead and other contaminants. So there's a lot of toxicities related to low-income communities as well, unfortunately. The Living Building Challenge is a framework to help rectify some of these issues. We have a strong focus on health through air quality and materials. So healthier housing results from the Living Building Challenge. Utility bills will either be, if not completely eliminated, at least drastically decreased, which reduces uncertain, variable in household budgets. The Living Building Challenge also focuses strongly on biophilic design and restoring the connection to nature, which improves physical and mental well-being. And overall, all of these impacts result in more equitable communities. We have 27 registered pilot projects right now. They're located throughout the nation. They represent income levels from about 30% average median income up to 80%. So they're really traditional, conventional, affordable housing projects, and they serve a number of different resident populations, which are shown here. The pilot projects are located in nearly all climate zones. We have a project in the Sonoran Desert in Arizona, and then all the way up to Anchorage, Alaska, and pretty much every climate zone in between. There are right now 3 certified affordable housing projects, which are all certified zero energy. We have several more projects in performance periods. Although the first round of projects certified under zero energy, projects right now are looking to certify under pedal certification and even living full certification. So there's really a nice progression that we've been seeing. We have 2 projects that are in the midst of being completed, which are volume projects, meaning that they're going to certify multiple buildings, and they are also seeking living certification. Last year, we updated our framework for affordable housing, which lays out all of the pathways for each imperative for affordable housing. It includes checklists, guidelines, best practices, as well as numerous case studies based on the 27 pilot projects that we've now been working with. We also have some calculations and analysis around energy and water pedal. This can be downloaded from living-future.org/affordable-housing. I'm not going to go through all of these. I think I'm running a little short on time, but overall, these are the top takeaways that we discovered through our research in pulling together the framework for affordable housing. So this is all the research from the last several years of working with these couple dozen pilot projects. I'm going to stop on this one for just a minute because I think Susan King is going to mention some of the red list free materials that she was able to install on her project. So as part of our pilot program, we focus strongly on healthy materials for affordable housing. Through conversations with manufacturers and with our project teams, we've come up with these 5 materials as ones that we think are the most accessible for finding red list free options. There's numerous options for all of these categories in Declare, most of which should have minimal to no cost impact. Additionally, Declare, is a great resource for finding healthy products. In addition to that, we've pulled together a materials list for affordable housing that right now has 15 categories, including the 5 that I just showed, and it's around 240 products. And it has products from Declare, but also some new products that ILFI did a little research on and discovered should also be red list free. That can be downloaded for free from our website as well. Several other affordable housing resources that can be downloaded for free are listed here. We have a guide for greening your local QAPs, some more guidance on materials, and online courses. Lastly, I wanted to mention that we are going to add some more pilot projects to our group. So if you're interested in joining our affordable housing working group and pursuing the Living Building Challenge with some support from ILFI, you can email affordablehousing@living-future.org. All right, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Susan King. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Susan King. I'm a Chicago-based architect, and I'm going to share with you our recent experience working with the ILFI's pilot program via this project, the Fifth Avenue Apartments in Maywood, Illinois. The developer for the project is Interfaith Housing Development Corporation, and we are part of the 3rd cohort of the pilot, and the project is currently under construction, and it will provide 72 apartments of varying sizes when it opens in early 2021. The development will target individuals and families with incomes at or below 60% of the area median income. For those not familiar with Chicago, the blue line on this map is the boundary of the city of Chicago proper. So as you can see, the village of Maywood sits just 2 suburbs outside of Chicago. For the next 10 minutes, I'm going to focus on two things. First, how the Living Building Challenge is also an advocacy tool. And second, I want to share some of the ways that working with the pilot has changed the way we work at HED. This image illustrates our design approach, with the top, or number one, being our baseline for what we consider business as usual in Illinois with regards to code, a green certification system per the Housing Authority's scoring system, and the ComEd Energy Grant. Once we were accepted into the pilot program, we worked with the Institute on a feasibility study to see what would be achievable and what the barriers might be given the parameters of our project. After the study was completed, we concluded that Energy Petal certification was a more realistic goal than full living building certification. We also viewed, as part of our process, Passive House as an important strategy towards achieving net zero. To build upon what the other Susan just shared in regards to the petals, this is another way of looking at petal certification. So in order to achieve the energy petal, our project would have to achieve the 3 petals here that have asterisks beside them. So place, health and happiness, and beauty, in addition to the energy petal. But of note, we also felt for our project that the equity petal was completely within our reach. And even though we were only now looking at petal certification, we still tried to look at each imperative and see how much we could actually accomplish in our project. So the 2 barriers that we hit during the feasibility study right out of the gate, one was financial and the other was regulatory. In regards to the financial one, our initial budget for IDA, for the Housing Authority in Illinois, was pretty bare bones. But we thought we could pursue full living building certification because we thought we would have access to the Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation's $1 million incentive via their net zero energy building program. However, it turned out that we were not eligible for this funding because the ICECF currently will only fund not-for-profit projects. So even though IHDC is a not-for-profit, the fact that they have to form an LLC in order to syndicate tax credits disqualified them from this funding. So basically the takeaway for other teams is that low-income housing tax credit projects in Illinois are not eligible for those dollars. The other obstacle in Illinois applies not just to housing, but for any project type seeking full living building certification, and it is the regulations around water reuse. Currently, approvals are given on a case-by-case basis by the Illinois Department of Public Health. But 2 years ago, when Fifth Avenue was in its design phase, this was understood to be a very laborious and time-intensive commitment, which our project unfortunately could not absorb. When faced with a barrier, that is when and where the Living Building Challenge becomes an advocacy tool. So here are 2 ways you can help us advocate for change. First is what I call revise to incentivize. The Midwest Decarbonization Coalition has formed in Illinois, and we are working on a proposal to actually re-green the state's qualified action plan to incentivize sustainability. And then second, in regards to water reuse, last year there was a proposal to IDPH to adopt new rules and standards which would allow for safe and reliable water reuse. Unfortunately, these rules were not passed, but if they had been, that would have streamlined the process for water reuse to be more easily incorporated into projects. The good news here is that according to Metropolitan Water Reclamation District Commissioner Josina Morita, the case-by-case process that we mentioned previously, or that I mentioned previously, has become more streamlined and somewhat easier to navigate. But also, Commissioner Morita, she was a huge proponent of the proposal last year, and she hopes to be able to take another pass at changing the rules in early 2021. So we are tracking this and keeping in touch with her so that we can assist her in that next round. And now a little bit about what we did actually do here. In this image that you're seeing, the building is under construction, and you can see the Chicago skyline in the distance. Regarding the place petal, Today at HED, we look at our site analysis in a deeper and richer way. This image shows how we typically do a site analysis. We always are looking at transit, the walk score, sun path is not shown here, but kind of the usual things that architects do when they first start looking at a site. But now, as a result of being involved in the pilot, we also look for community solar partners, knowing that we would have needed renewables to get to net zero on our roof at Fifth Avenue, and the space that we had would not have been enough. This led us to basically looking at our neighbors' roofs and who might be a potential solar partner. So our site analysis today also now takes into account the natural history of the site. And in the case of Fifth Avenue, we learned through this process that the oldest ash tree in Northeast Illinois has lived in Maywood for the past 250 years. And it's currently being protected from the ash borers with a treatment until the danger passes locally, which was set to be this year, 2020. So the tree was named the Great Dane after Jens Jensen, who was the founder of the Midwest Prairie Ecology Movement over 100 years ago. And the tree is located within the old growth woods just east of Proviso East High School, which was actually one of the places we had identified as a community solar partner. Since the Fifth Avenue will open in 2021, we had hoped that perhaps we could specify ash trees at our site. Unfortunately, we learned that we could not do this because the nurseries are not growing them due to lack of demand, so we wouldn't have been able to source them. But even if we had been able to source them, the new trees would be extremely susceptible to infestation. So while it would be a better story if we were able to help prevent the extinction of the ash tree by reintroducing it at our site, I still think it is a good example of what you learn when you analyze a project site in this way. In terms of the equity pedal, we always did shading studies before, but now we do them actually with equity in mind. And these diagrams show that Fifth Avenue complies with the requirements for Transect L4, which allows shading to a height of 10 meters or 32.8 feet. So this imperative within the Living Building Challenge also looks at fresh air and natural waterways in addition to sunlight. And then in regards to the energy pedal, as combustion is not allowed in living buildings, I initially thought that that would be one of our major barriers. But after much analysis, looking at first cost and what would be acceptable to ComEd, our building turned out to be what the client now describes as electric centric. While we did end up with the most efficient system, it's still a little troubling to me that because electric costs so much more than natural gas in Illinois, it will not be the most affordable to operate in the near term. But we are ready for a future when natural gas is no longer available. Also of note was that the building was designed as solar ready, and really recently we were able to get approval to install a PV array system on our roof as a betterment from our contingency dollars. So it won't be enough to make us net zero, but it will, every little bit helps. And then in regards to materials, the top 5 that Susan had identified previously for us at HED is now an office standard. And then I would add 2 categories to that. I believe, and we are trying to always specify red list free roofing and windows. So before the pilot participation, we were using mindful materials as part of our vetting process, and now we have added Declare to that process. And then lastly, we also we learned about this tool as part of the working with the pilot, and it's called Home Free, and you can see the website there, and we find it a really, really great resource that we now share with our clients so that they can better understand the ingredients of the products that we are putting into their buildings, and we can make better choices. And with that, I will now turn it over to Sierra Latham, and we will get a glimpse into our neighbor state, Indiana.
Thank you very much, Susan. My name is Sierra Latham. I am the Director for Moving Forward with Energy Systems Network. Moving Forward is a statewide affordable housing pilot program that's located in Indiana, which brings a systems approach to align affordable, sustainable housing and transportation. For budgeting purposes, a typical household is expected to spend about 30% of their income on housing, including utilities, and an additional 15% on transportation. But many households end up spending much more than that. For low and moderate income households especially, housing and transportation consistently represent the two largest monthly expenses. We know that housing, utility, and transportation expenses are interrelated, and savings in one area often result in increased costs in another area. In buildings where rent is considered affordable, utility and efficient design characteristics can result in monthly utility bills that push that total housing cost beyond the 30% threshold. In urban areas, low-cost market rate housing, if it exists at all, in many cases it doesn't, but if it does exist, it's typically located far from employment centers or in areas that are poorly served by public transportation. In this way, housing and transportation costs are inversely related. Affordable housing and developers generally want to create communities to improve their residents' financial stability, but they can often lack the tools, the proven technologies, or the implementation packages necessary to incorporate energy-efficient design principles and mobility solutions into their properties. However, equipped with the right knowledge, resources, and partnerships, affordable housing providers have the unique opportunity to benefit low-income households by incorporating net zero energy and transportation solutions into their properties. At a high level, the goal of Moving Forward is to break down those knowledge and technical barriers. Moving Forward was first established in 2015 as a joint effort of the Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority, IHCDA, and Energy Systems Network, ESN. Moving Forward acknowledges that housing, utility, and transportation expenses are interconnected and aims to mitigate all three simultaneously using an integrated systems approach. More specifically, the goal of the program is to encourage select development teams receiving low-income housing tax credits to incorporate net zero design principles and transportation solutions into their properties, and to think of a total cost of ownership model when they are really considering the expenses of those things. In recent iterations, the program has also challenged development teams to incorporate on-site poverty alleviation measures or direct service provision. Although, to be honest, most affordable housing providers are already thinking of ways that they can provide wraparound services to their residents to better their economic opportunities. IHCDA and ESN's public-private partnership is at the core of Moving Forward and is one of the organizational components that allows the program to be effective. So just thinking through the way that the process works on the left side of the screen, IHCDA starts with being responsible for selecting development teams and managing the set-aside life credits that motivate affordable housing developers to participate in the program. After the teams have been selected, ESN coordinates an intensive innovation workshop, which brings the two development teams with subject matter experts from public, private, nonprofit, and academic spaces. For example, in past workshops, we've welcomed organizations leading the way in net zero building design recommendations. For example, Susan Puri has actually joined us back in, I believe, 2017 with the International Living Futures Institute. Academic organizations also, such as Purdue's Center for High Performance Buildings, along with local government officials, community-based organizations, and residents that really are stakeholders in the communities that these affordable properties are going to serve. Together, development teams create specific energy, transportation, and poverty alleviation goals that they're going to then implement in their properties. Following the innovation workshop, IHCDA and ESN work together to provide timely technical support to the development teams as they design and construct the new properties. IHCDA connects the teams with service providers and funding opportunities in other state and federal agencies, as well as banks and other financing providers. And ESN engages its network of subject matter experts, stakeholders, NGOs, industry leaders throughout the design and development process to support the development teams. ESN also continues to identify vendors and build partnerships with service providers to help each team meet the goals set in the workshop. In some cases, this type of support continues beyond the end of construction, as has been the case for our first two cohorts of development teams. Since 2015, Moving Forward has worked with 8 development teams working on new construction projects across Indiana, which will ultimately serve more than 200 households. In addition to these development teams, We have also worked with 3 developers incorporating moving forward goals into about 30 rehabilitation properties in the rural parts of the state. Energy efficient design and on-site renewable energy generation located at these sites will directly benefit residents by reducing their utility expenses. Several sites, such as Posterity Heights and Fort Wayne, have incorporated gamification techniques into their properties in order to maintain residents' awareness of their utility consumption and also to further incentivize reduced usage of electricity and other utilities. Transportation solutions can take a few different forms, and it really depends on the property. Many properties are transit-oriented. For example, Beeline Heights in Bloomington is located adjacent to a bus stop, and it's also located along the Beeline multimodal trail, which goes directly into the employment centers of the city. Other properties are amenity-oriented, such as 838 East in Lafayette, which is walking distance from a community college campus, a YMCA, and a hospital. We also encourage shared use mobility, but this has historically been a challenge. For example, residents have difficulty accessing micro-mobility like scooters or bike share if they don't have access to a major credit card or a smartphone. ESN is kind of starting to resolve this by currently working on creating car share opportunities that would serve all 8 moving forward properties. We're focusing on mission-oriented vendors who would be willing to price vehicles so that moving forward residents could afford to use them as an alternative to personal car ownership. In addition, wraparound services are tailored on a site-by-site basis depending on the population living in the property. Broadway Lofts, for example, up in Gary, Indiana, is located in a food desert. The developer for that property is going to bring a sustainable, healthy food source to their residents by building a greenhouse on site. Harbor Square in East Chicago is going to take a whole family approach to on-site services at their property, but you will hear about that in just a moment from Jessica with UPholdings. So I just spoke about some of the outputs that we're seeing from moving forward. This slide really shows the high-level outcomes that we are hoping for the properties. Starting with the effects on the residents themselves. All of these improvements contribute to residents' quality of life, both from a financial and a health perspective. With reduced housing and transportation costs, residents will have more disposable income immediately available. Poverty alleviation programming provides residents with greater access to economic opportunity and economic mobility, and on-site health will improve residents' health and well-being. By incorporating net zero design principles into moving forward properties, these buildings are going to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and pollution, which will have a net positive effect on the environment and improve public health, even beyond the communities where the properties are located. And lastly, as a reminder, moving forward is at its core a pilot program. Ultimately, we're hoping to expand moving forward beyond Indiana with IHCDA and ESN's public-private partnership serving as a model for affordable housing nationally, working with partners such as ILFI and other groups working in this space. I did want to just discuss a few of the obstacles that moving forward development teams typically, can run into throughout this process. The biggest one that we've acknowledged is that general contractors might not necessarily have knowledge about the technologies that we're asking them to implement. In those cases, they might either refuse to install new technologies into the buildings, or they might do so at a premium to allow for uncertainty associated with the amount of time needed to install the new technologies. Mostly these issues have been related to mechanical, electrical, and plumbing contractors. We also really want to recognize that development teams operate in a constrained funding environment. They can have difficulty identifying resources to subsidize or finance the cost of many of the technologies we're asking them to implement, but especially renewable technologies. Kind of related to that, in some instances, development teams might be reluctant to invest in components that have a high upfront capital cost, because every additional dollar spent on something that has capital costs could otherwise be spent on direct services that benefit their residents. For example, the money that you would spend on solar panels could instead be used to directly subsidize residents' electricity costs for the duration of the property's affordability period. And lastly, several properties properties have had difficulty reaching agreements with electricity providers that would enable them to incorporate on-site renewable power generation into their design. While some utilities incentivize renewable energy technologies in multifamily buildings, others do not provide a straightforward agreement to allow residents to directly benefit from on-site energy production. We found that designing multifamily properties to have a single master electricity meter makes it easier to coordinate net metering agreements with utility companies. Properties can then use electricity usage measuring devices to bill individual tenants, or can even layer in gamification or feedback mechanisms to continue to help engage residents. Thank you so much for your time. I am now going to let Jessica talk about her good work in East Chicago with UPholdings.
Hi everyone, my name is Jessica Berzac. I am the president with UPholdings. We are now a national developer with projects in the Midwest and now out in California. We have substantial supportive housing experience with IHCDA and have really had a lot of experience working with them on projects that are really policy driven rather than QAP and scoring driven. And that's what led us to pursue the Moving Forward program. IHCDA has really allowed us to kind of push some visionary and unique projects that we've been really thankful for. It's not in other cases that we've been asked to have a poverty expert be a part of our development team. And as a mission-driven organization, when Moving Forward 3.0 asked us to do that, we signed on right away. So we were really excited when we were selected to be a part of this project. Moving Forward 3.0 asked us to consider hitting net zero, yes, but also asked us to design a housing development that would end the cycles of generational poverty. And to that, we also said, yes, please. We have worked with the mayor and the city and many, many local organizations in East Chicago. We ended up picking a site that is right in the North Harbor neighborhood in their kind of downtown district. It was a site that actually the city had acquired and done the demolition. It's actually right across from a senior housing development, and we are developing 28 units of housing, 15 one bedrooms, 13 two bedrooms, and it's over about 4,500 commercial retail space. The city had really done significant downtown investment in that area. In general, the state focused on East Chicago because of a Superfund site and some major lead contamination. So we thought it was important to be part of a solution and create some replacement housing for the residents of East Chicago. Moving forward, as Sierra was explaining, really kind of says we've got to do more than look at the cost of housing in those calculations for residents. As operators of our portfolio, of course, we're looking at housing plus utilities, and moving forward asked us to look at transit as well, which we know can very often be at a huge expense for low-income families. I think in large part at UPholdings, because we do so much work with vulnerable and disabled population groups through our supportive housing portfolio and our work with homeless populations, we know that health costs can be a number 4, maybe even number 3 cost in that pie chart of where families are spending their money. So we just brought a health clinic on site. So we have a 4,500 square foot federally qualified health center that is right there on the corner. We're partnering with HealthLink, which is the primary FQHC already present in East Chicago. They needed to expand anyway. They're bursting at their seams. So it was a great partnership to be able to give them additional space, it's going to be a vanilla box that they'll build out themselves. They'll have optometry, some behavioral health, and primary health. So we know that that will immediately improve some of those social determinants for our residents and immediately step in and have more disposable income because people already won't have to be pushing and working so hard to access important health resources for themselves. By working with HealthLink and thinking about that robust goal to reduce the total cost of ownership for residents, think about improving the quality of life, energy efficiency, general poverty alleviation, what we ended up designing was what we are calling the wage and asset growth plan, which is really kind of taking what we do in supportive housing and putting it in regular family housing and thinking about what we as a housing provider can do to break the cycle of hopelessness for these households. Not labeling them as hopeless, but in the case that the systemic portions of poverty are hopeless, we're hoping that we can break those cycles. And what I'll say about Moving Forward 3.0 is that it sets really big goals. In the initial workshop, you know, when we're presented with these petals from the IFLI challenge, it feels kind of daunting and definitely unfunded for an affordable housing development to be able to pursue things like this. But I will also say that it has changed the way that my firm works. It's changed the way that we approach thinking about housing design and thinking about services for straight family housing. Kind of like Susan King was describing in terms of just approach to design, site selection. For us, it's an approach to tenant interactions, to service partnerships, and what our long-term goals are and what we believe is possible as an industry of affordable housers. We think that something like this actually has the potential to really set higher expectations of what's possible as outcomes of what we can do with our residents. So in being asked to look at costs and break those cycles of poverty in our wage and asset growth plan, what we're gonna do is the HealthLink, as our on-site partner, will use their community health workers to really staff this plan. So they'll have their regular primary health, but then they will also be our partners in executing this wage and asset growth plan, and their community health workers will work with us to connect on health and wellness, education, professional growth, family well-being, financial health, and then outcome tracking. And our ultimate goals are obviously to increase assets and wages by helping families have cradle to career supports such that they have access to high quality, affordable daycare so that they can go to school, so that they can get better jobs, so that they have access to savings plans, child savings accounts, so that they have the ability to increase the assets in their family and move out of affordable housing and into something else beyond a down payment assistance type program, but really the supports necessary so that they don't feel the cliff of affordable to middle income in front of them and have the ability to move forward. Harbor Square is gonna fortunately end up pretty darn green, even though, like I said, it ended up a challenge because there weren't an excess of funds despite the goals of the initiative. We did end up pretty close. We ended up with a full solar array. We've maxed out the roof. And so because of that, we are going to be able to hit both NGBS Gold, and then we also believe we'll be able to hit the net zero certification with Susan Puri and their team, which is great for a lot of reasons. We think that one's important to us because it's not based on modeling, it's based on operations, and that's important for communication and advocacy, like we were talking about earlier, and being able to show it, not just talk about it. And to be able to use those tools and the lessons learned in our portfolio going forward and be able to take those lessons and use it in projects as we continue to expand our portfolio. So we're definitely thankful to have been a part of it. Like every project, of course, it was a challenge. We did break ground about 6 weeks ago and are currently, despite the pandemic, actually on track with our construction schedule, and hopefully we'll be moving people in a year from now, and a year after that, hopefully have, gotten people into some educational programming and start seeing some lives changed. So we're thankful to have been a part of moving forward. And at this time, we're going to wrap up the formal presentation and open both the chat windows and turn on our cameras and start fielding any questions you might have for any of us. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Jessica and Susan and Sierra. I'm really excited to open it up for questions to this panel of all amazing women. So I'll turn over to Susan and let you guys take it away.
Okay, thank you, Katie, and thank you to my co-panelists and to the audience, everyone who's listening in. This is, we're excited to be here and to share our experiences with you all. So I get to ask my question of the panelists first and open it up. And please do, though, put your questions in the Q&A so we can monitor those and try to get those answered live now. So my opener question here for that each that my co-panelists can each take a stab at, because they'll give a different perspective in terms of their answer. But it's, Indiana is now poised to deliver 2 affordable net zero energy housing developments. And in Illinois, we currently have 0 at the scale that we're talking about. So I am interested to hear what advice each of you could give to the state of Illinois, or perhaps more generally to any state, in regards to programs and policies that might help them up their game. So, and then also, what advice would each of you give to architects and or developers who are also aspiring to build higher performing buildings? So, I don't know who wants to go first. Jessica.
Yeah, I'll go first. It's interesting because dollar for dollar, there's more money in Illinois for affordable housing than in Indiana. GAP funds are more robust in Illinois. So in theory, you would think it would actually be more attainable in Illinois. So I was thinking about this last night, and it's going to seem kind of simplistic, but the difference about our Harbor Square project is we worked on it as a team with IHCDA and obviously with ESN kind of as the conduit. So when we hit snags, like rather than it be like, oh shoot, it's a scoring item, what are we going to do? We called IHCDA and they had direct lines to other state leaders who were able to say, this is a collective housing goal, let's solve this problem together. And so it wasn't like it was our exclusive challenge as a developer to solve a problem. We had like executive leadership at the state level that was on our team helping us hit the same goal. And that's ultimately why it worked.
Yeah, I think that I would echo that. I know that one of the things that we've heard, not just from Jessica and her team, but from some of our other teams, is just that flexibility on timing is really critical to give development teams the space and ability to kind of think creatively about how to implement energy efficient technologies into their buildings that aren't at this point typical for affordable properties. I would say that another way that Indiana has incentivized energy efficient design has been through a revision of its QAP process. Less a formal QAP and more setting aside some of its LIHTC allocations specifically for the Moving Forward program. Hopefully, then that the learnings from the Moving Forward process can be incorporated back into the QAP, just to kind of give development teams that are applying for LIHTC tax credits, either the set-asides or for kind of traditional tax credits, to include energy efficient design in what they're proposing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I also agree with both of you. I think including the Living Building Challenge and other net zero and sustainability goals in your qualified allocation plan is really important. and also giving appropriate incentives that match the level of difficulty and achievement of each particular program, so that you're not giving, Passive House and Living Building Challenge maybe the same number of points as, everything else, given that there is more effort involved. I think the Moving Forward model is really unique, and I don't know of any other state that's doing that. But it sounds like it's been pretty effective from what we've heard at ILFI. So I think other states looking into that model could also be really effective too.
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I look forward to, I mentioned I'm working with a group to, we're working on a proposal for Illinois for their next round of their QAP, and it's not that they have nothing in there. I can't. Passive House is in there right now. The Living Building Challenge used to be in there, and that's why I say we're regreening it, because it's not like we're starting from scratch here. We're just trying to regain our ground and then move it forward. So I look forward to you guys helping us with those discussions, and maybe giving input into what we propose might be helpful. Okay, so one question has come in, but actually before we leave Moving Forward though, I actually have one question for Jessica, and if she could expand on the poverty expert. So how, that's awesome. So what did that, how did you find was it a person, a company? What does, elaborate on that.
So Moving Forward started with a request for qualified teams rather than qualified projects. So rather than starting with a project that scored, you came in as a team, with a qualified team with a vision. And so they wanted to know how, as a team, you were going to deal with the poverty alleviation goals of the Moving Forward program. So we actually came in with a professor, a sociology professor from DePaul, who actually teaches within the education system, but whose research has been predominantly focused on low-income families and how inequitable access to education and food impacts low-income families. And I think it's really important. And now that we're going to start the outcome tracking part, we're working with Sierra again. We're going to probably switch to Purdue as a partner to how some of the things we do from that kind of research perspective, how property management techniques, how those community health workers are going to work with households, what research kind of tells us about best practices. Like for instance, we often just pay all utility costs in affordable housing because in some ways that just removes one of those barriers. But then you take a family and you move them into a more independent environment and they have to pay their own utilities. So how do you transition that in terms of education and helping families learn to save and understand the utilities and that kind of thing. And so having a poverty expert inform the design and inform that wage and asset growth plan actually shifted our lens a lot of times and helped us talk to family childcare programs and some of the kind of comprehensive family programming that we looked at.
Cool. Thank you. So we've got two questions here live or in the live chat. First, Scott Farbman, does ICECF need to shift their program requirements to better suit these affordable housing projects? So that was part of what I talked about, the barrier we hit there. The short answer is yes. I first went around thinking somehow that's what I was going to work on first in terms of advocacy. But then when I met the gentleman who's leading the Midwest Decarbonization Coalition, he felt that our energy might be better spent, no pun intended, working on the QAPs first. Apparently, I don't know if anyone from ICECF is in the audience or anything like that, but apparently it's a I guess it's political. It's a political organization, and maybe we didn't have the right connections. I don't know if you can help us work on that. Because my Susan Puri will remember this when it first came up as part of the pilot, and I came back. I said, well, let's go meet with them, and whoever is the decision maker, maybe they just need to be educated that this is how low-income housing tax credits work. But yeah, we didn't get very far with that. So I'm willing to help educate them if that's what it will take, but it seemed like maybe it was more political than that. But now I know FAR was in the audience. I don't know if they're still on. They were able to access those dollars, but I guess my understanding there is that it was because it's a housing authority. So, but it's just, we all know low-income housing tax credits is the main game in town for how we get our housing, housing at scale built. And so it's just not available to us, which is frustrating. And it used to be available, because I've used that funding on a lot of housing for not for net zero, but for helping to get renewables on projects and things like that. So something shifted there. I don't know when, and I don't know if we can shift it back. And then the next question is, I think for Susan Puri, have any studies been done linking LBC affordable housing to transitions out of low-income situations in comparison to standard affordable housing?
No, not yet. So we started working with pilot projects a few years ago, and they were all, at the design stage when we started with them. So we're just now getting to the point where we have projects that are built and occupied. Definitely looking at the occupants' experience of living there and the different aspects of the Living Building Challenge, and what that impact has been is something that is in our plan going forward. We have one project up in Everett, Washington that was completed last year, Hope Workstation, that includes both workforce training as well as housing. And I know that they're, deeply engaging with the residents and those in their workforce training programs about the sustainability aspects of their building, what their experience is with it. And they've had some good feedback so far, especially on the job training side. A lot of the residents and occupants have been kind of excited to get access to this newer technology and equipment that they can, then put on their resume and show that they have some great experience that others don't have. But, in terms of quality of life interventions, urban agriculture, and other things that are part of the Living Building Challenge, we're hoping to get more feedback on that in the future as well.
Okay. Okay, so we are almost out of time here. So I guess we've answered all the questions that came in, so that's good. I don't know if each of you want to say a parting word. I mean, my conclusion would be, to reach out to me. I think my contact information is somewhere in all of this. If you want to help us in Illinois advocate for change here to make some of, to make this, I don't want to say easier, it's probably never going to be easy, but to to make it easy, reach out to me, and we'd love to have all the help we can get. Yeah, so I don't know if you guys want to each say a closing line, and we'll probably be right out of time.
Along that thread, I'll just jump in and say on our website, we have a guide for greener QAPs that our policy team produced in the last few months with the help of Susan King. And our policy team is also happy to work with anyone out there on their state's QAP in Illinois or other states. So you can email affordablehousing@living-future.org if you want some information or to be connected to them. And if you have any affordable housing projects and you're looking to go net zero or any other aspect of the Living Building Challenge, I'd love to talk with you and give you some more information. So feel free to email.
I can go next just really briefly. One of my big tasks for the next year or so is going to be to figure out how moving forward is going to grow and evolve. And that doesn't just involve me thinking alone in a room, although that's more of my life these days. That really involves input from architects, development teams, affordable housing, advocates throughout space and time to figure out, really how this kind of program would be beneficial and if there's space for it to grow and evolve into neighboring states or maybe even nationally. So look out for my email. I will be contacting you, or if you want to be proactive, you can get in touch with me. Thank you.
And I would just say, I don't know how many developers are in this crew. I think all development teams have kind of different angles, and pieces of this work that's most important to them. And I think, most of us ultimately do this for the residents and the people who live within our portfolios. And some of this stuff can be kind of challenging. And so I'm really thankful for the all of yous that kind of help make it more approachable for the us's. And obviously we need more funding. We need more advocacy and funding to make all of this a reality. But, without that be, magically happening, it's possible. I mean, we didn't magically get a ton of money to hit net zero in a tiny little project in Indiana. So I think by really working creatively and having some really, really strong advocates, we made it work. So we got to work hard, but that's going to be a game changer. And so it's changed how my firm works. And I think it'll hopefully, make some changes in the industry. So thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thanks to the audience, and I'll give it back to Katie.